let's have a conversation about how we do it. Some people are looking to do it all the time. Some of us think about it all the time, but never do it. Other people avoid it at all costs. And there are some people that do it for revenge. I've even heard that there are some people that only do it when there are 3 people involved. You might be thinking that maybe I do it with some style, but actually, whenever I do it, it just ends up really messy. Get your head out of the gutter. We're talking about how you handle conflict. If you're looking to find out more about your conflict style in relationships, this is the video for you. The truth is, though, we all handle conflict in different ways, and that is because our conflict style is determined by the context. So how you handle conflict at work is probably very different from how you handle conflict with your partner. And how you handle it with your partner probably depends on what it is that you're arguing about. There are actually 3 different factors that influence our responses in conflict. Number 1 is about how much time you have to respond to the conflict or the issue. It plays a really significant part in how you respond to a disagreement. Deciding what restaurant you want to eat in next Saturday is going to be very different from a conversation or a conflict about what restaurant to eat in if your movie starts in an hour. Less important. You're more likely to put up more of a resistance if there's more time in that situation and you've got a preference. Number 2, the importance of the relationship. We're going to be more confrontational or much more polite to a stranger compared to our partner, and I guess that depends on our temperament. The relative importance of the relationship is a massive part in how we handle conflict. The difference between whether you have a deep connection with someone or whether it's just a passing moment is going to determine your level of investment in the relationship, and we act accordingly. Number 3 is the importance of the issues. Sometimes we find ourselves fighting or in a conflict over something as trivial as the day of the week or what the exact time that thing that didn't happen should have happened. Not really important, but sometimes we put more emphasis on it than we should. So if eating a burger before you see a movie is super important to you, then that conversation is going to go very differently if you don't care about it. We unconsciously factor in these 3 items that that are really going to influence the way that we conduct ourselves in a conflict. Okay, so this model is the Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Model. It's a tool designed to help individuals understand how different conflict handling styles affect interpersonal and group dynamics in a business. So this is based on a model of conflict which asserts that people's behavior in conflict situations can be described along these 2 dimensions, assertiveness and cooperativeness. The first is the degree to which you're assertive or not. So assertiveness is the extent to which a person tries to satisfy their own concerns. It's about standing up for your own rights, needs, or beliefs. The more assertive you are, the more you're going to fight for what you want. A less assertive person is going to be more passive or more accommodating and give in to the other person's needs, wants, and desires. The other axis here is the cooperativeness dimension. It gauges the degree to which an individual seeks to fulfill the concerns and needs of the other person involved in the conflict. So it sort of represents the willingness to work together and collaborate. A person who scores high on cooperativeness is inclined to find solutions that address both their own needs and the other parties. So they're going to emphasize mutual benefit or compromise. In contrast, someone with low levels of cooperativeness might prioritize their own interests without any regard for the other person. So this model gives us 4 quadrants and 4 different styles of negotiating conflict, but we have a bonus one in the middle, which, no surprise, is called the halfway mark, or compromise. This model was created for the business world, and as such has more of a sort of corporate tone to it. In human relationships, we tend to show more of ourselves and can be a bit more emotional. Plus, conflict triggers all of our old childhood wounds, and we can be a bit more regressive in our approaches to dealing with conflict with people that we really care about because we're attached to them. So the quiz on MyPeoplePatterns gives you 10 different options that have a bit more flavor than these sterile but useful ideas. If you've not taken it already, please go ahead and do it. You can join our email list there, and I'll send you a ton of information on relationships and conflict. The styles that you get from the quiz can be superimposed on this model because we're still dealing with assertiveness and cooperativeness. We want to be somewhat fluid in the way that we handle disagreements. If we're always accommodating or always giving in to the other person, that's going to lead to a real buildup of resentment and anger over time. Conversely, if we're always exploding and making sure that we get our own way, that's going to create, emotional distance between you and your partner because they won't feel seen or heard or recognized. Fluidity means that we can access the three factors: time, relationship, and importance, and modify our reaction with more awareness. This is the key to it all. We want awareness. We want choices in our reactions, not to be stuck in a role like the volcano or the analyst. We want to have some flexibility there. What's missing in the Thomas-Kilmann model, though, is anger. And I think what we do with anger in relationships is so important. There's a couple of different types of anger that I think we should talk about. Passive-aggressive anger is an indirect expression of anger. Subtle insults, delaying on tasks deliberately aimed to frustrate the other person. Explosive anger is characterized by unwanted and disproportionate fits of rage. This, of course, can lead to heated arguments, physical fights, property damage. This is a little bit more concerning for therapists like myself. There's a related disorder in the DSM-5 called intermittent explosive disorder, but not everyone who's got an explosive temper fits that criteria. Hardened anger is a deep-seated and persistent flavor of anger. Individuals who have this type of anger have a really hard time forgiving. They hold on to bitterness and hatred. Vengeful anger is all about revenge, getting back at someone for a perceived wrong. Chronic anger is more long-lasting and persists for months on end. Individuals with chronic anger feel angry almost all of the time, from morning to night. Okay, so if you recognize any of those 5 different types of anger, drop me a line below in the comments and let me know which type of anger you have and which type of anger you want me to explore more. What I prefer about the conflict quiz on MyPeoplePatterns.com is that we talk about anger. It's so important. Let me tell you a little bit about the different styles of conflict that you can get when you take the MyPeoplePatterns.com quiz and what type of anger is associated with each of them. The fighter is assertive and unafraid to express their feelings or opinions during a conflict. They're proactive, they're very assertive. They confront disagreements head on, standing their ground, even if they know that they're going to get pushback. The fighter deals with anger by confronting it head on, sometimes explosive, sometimes persistent. Sort of depends on the type of fighter that we're dealing with. Some fighters can be angry all of the time and have chronic anger. Now, the defender is primarily concerned with protecting themselves or their point of view during a conflict. They're going to focus on defending their actions or beliefs, often building like a metaphorical wall between themselves and the other person. I depict them as having a shield and a sword because they're going to lash back at you as well. The defender often perceives criticism or conflict as a personal attack, and they can respond sometimes with vengeful anger. They can become retaliatory or defensive and become a little bit too preoccupied on defending themselves than finding the solution. Now, the avoider retreats from all types of conflict, often out of a desire to maintain peace or avoid discomfort. They often suppress their feelings, they're afraid of confrontation, and they often deny it even exists. This can lead to disowned anger, where the anger is not acknowledged or expressed, and that leads to a whole bunch of potential issues in the future in a relationship. The volcano is characterized by intense emotional reactions during conflict. They erupt with anger. They express their feelings in a way that can be overwhelming, can be intimidating to other people. The volcano deals with anger by letting it build up until it erupts. I think sometimes this can be used defensively. When somebody gets so big and so loud and so angry, the message there is, don't come to me with conflict. It can be vengeful, it can be explosive, but it's always disproportionate and sometimes vengeful. Now, the analyst approaches conflict with logic and detachment. They focus on facts and solutions, often keeping their emotions in check. They kind of think their way out of feelings. So the analyst tends to intellectualize their anger. Rather than express it or feel it, it becomes disowned. The critic tends to find fault in others out of anger, and especially during conflict. They often instigate conflict without really knowing that they're doing it. So they can use criticism as a defense or a way to control someone, or a really dysfunctional way of getting their needs met. The criticizer uses anger as a weapon. So it's a kind of hardened anger or vengeful anger where they can hold a grudge or use it in a very intimidating, hurtful way. The diplomat seeks to mediate conflict and find that middle ground. They want to understand all the different sides and work towards compromise. So they might encourage everyone to express their views and then help the group find a solution. They're about keeping the peace. Where does their anger go? Well, I guess, again, it's disowned anger. It's suppressed because they want to be in their thoughts rather than their feelings. So anger is never acknowledged or expressed in a healthy way. The deflector tends to change the subject or make light of the situation to avoid dealing with conflict. They can use humor, they can use distraction. They steer the conversation away from ever getting heated, but also away from finding solutions. So they redirect their anger and shift it onto others often, which is a form of passive-aggressive anger. The individual expresses their anger really indirectly. They don't take accountability. And nothing really gets resolved. Now, the Stonewaller retreats from conflict, but uses their silence as a form of passive resistance. They withhold communication and affection to express their anger. Now, this is really passive-aggressive. They shut down and they hurt people through a lack of communication. So it can be a form of hardened anger, and it can be a form of passive-aggressive anger where they're indirectly expressing their dissatisfaction or resentment. So go check out if you haven't done so already, please check out the quiz on MyPeoplePatterns.com, where you can start to see that if you take the quiz on MyPeoplePatterns.com, you'll be able to get a detailed report of what your style is and where your anger maps out on these quadrants. And again, you can sign up to our mailing list, and I will give you a ton of information about conflict and relationships. And also hit subscribe and like if you want more on relationships and conflict, and I'll keep these videos coming.